Welcome. Hello. Thank you for joining us. My name's Monica Miller, and I'm the Marketing and Promotions Coordinator at Caitlin Press. I'm happy to have you all join us from afar, near and wide, on the Crowdcast for Pat Henman's book launch. I'll just start with a bit of introduction, a bit of housekeeping while people trickle in. As you start, you'll probably see the chat. Feel free to join us in there. Caitlin Press is an independent Canadian publisher located on the Sunshine Coast in British Columbia. And we publish culturally significant books, including fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. Caitlin Press is also home to Dagger Editions, an imprint for the voices of queer women-identifying writers. I'd like to acknowledge that Caitlin Press receives support from the Government of Canada and the British Columbia Arts Council. And as a small independent publisher, this help is vital to keeping us afloat. And although we are joining you from all different places virtually, we are on the land of Indigenous people. So I'd like to recognize that Caitlin Press is located in Half Moon Bay on the traditional territories of the Squamish, Sechelt, Sliamon, and Clahoosie First Nations. I work remotely from Vancouver, which is the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. And Pat, Maia, and Sydney Black, who's our special musical guest, are all located on the traditional unceded territory of the Sinext Arrow Lakes and the Yakanuki Lower Kootenay Band peoples, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Indigenous peoples. And my apologies for screwing up any pronunciation. So a few housekeeping notes. Crowdcast is a really easy platform because all you have to do is sit there and enjoy. If your video and your microphone will never be active, but we are recording, and the event will be available to watch on YouTube after the event, after the live event. You can join us in the chat. The chat is not recorded to YouTube, and all other users can see the chat. So if you post there, it is public right now. If you find it distracting, if you're on a desktop computer, you can hide it by hovering over it, and there's going to be a little arrow at the top that you can, a little down arrow. There's also an ask a question function. If you're on a desktop computer, it's down here, or you can ask it in the chat, and I will tag it as a question. Pat will make time at the end of her reading to answer some audience questions, and we're looking forward to that. You can also look there and see if someone else has already asked this question, and that's your burning desire, and you can vote to that you want to know the answer to. And of course, we encourage you to purchase the book. We do have two lovely bookstore partners. Otter Books in Nelson and Bookmark in Halifax are two official booksellers for the event. Otter Books has signed copies, and Bookmark has exclusive signed book plates. So if you click the button down here, it says buy a signed copy from our bookstore partners, or you can go to caitlin-press.com to find links to the booksellers, or you can buy it from Caitlin Press as well. If you're not in either Nelson or Halifax, I encourage you to seek out the book at your local independent bookseller. If they don't already have it in stock, they'll be able to order it for you. We'd love if you let us know where you're joining us from in the chat. If you have any questions for me, I'll be in there for the event. Questions like, what's my local bookstore from wherever city you're from? So, without further ado, I'd like to now introduce Pat and Maia. I'm just going to read their bios. So Pat Henman is a veteran of the Canadian theatre as an actor, director, and vocalist. Her bio also includes radio, film, and television credits. Originally from Nova Scotia, Pat and her family have made Nelson, BC their home since 2000. Pat has a degree in theatre from Dalhousie University and studied creative writing at UBC. She is the 2018 recipient of a special citation in recognition for her considerable contribution to arts, culture, and heritage in the city of Nelson, BC. And she was nominated for the Courage to Come Back Award in 2015. Pat is an appointed director of the BC Arts Council and the Pacific Regional Victims Advisory Committee. She is also an active volunteer for MAD Canada. Pat's memoir, which we're celebrating today, Beyond the Legal Limit, is her first nonfiction book. The adapted dramatic stage presentation of her story with music will premiere at Capitol Theater in Nelson and will be live streamed April 9th. And for more information on that, you can visit pathenman.com. I'll put a link to that in the chat as well. And Maia Vezina, I forgot to check if that is how I say it. So you'll have to correct me when you guys come up, Pat and Maia. Maia is a 27-year-old inclusive educator located in Nelson, BC. She completed her 2 degrees at the University of Calgary while recovering and relearning how to walk after the crash in 2013. While the journey to recovery is lifelong for Maia, she has persevered and achieved her goal of completing university, teaching students, exploring the world, and engaging in her passions and hobbies. Maia is a member of MAD Canada, an advocate for those with chronic illness through her social media blog and online chronic illness support group, and strives to be a support system for whoever may need one. So with that, I will leave you to the wonderful hands of Pat Henman and her daughter, Maia.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you. Hi, everybody. This is so awesome to see all the names on the side here. Thank you so much for coming today. Welcome. This is my daughter, Maia Vezina.
No, that's okay. Hello.
Maia is going to be popping in to make comments and tell us a few stories of her own as we move on in today's reading. So the first thing I want to do is just show you that this is the book, Beyond the Legal Limit. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it. We're going to do just a little intro before I get right into the readings. I hope everybody can see us and hear us. The lighting here is incredible. The sun is coming in the window here. I'm at Maia's place. It's really an awesome day here in Nelson, BC. Thank you for coming to my very first book launch. And it's a virtual book launch at that. Later in today's session, we're going to have a special guest, my friend and colleague, Sydney Black. She's going to sing a song from the stage presentation that's also based on this book, Beyond the Legal Limit. So we're going to have her come up a little later and sing a song. I want to send my deepest gratitudes to Monica, Sarah, and Vicky at Caitlin Press. Thank you for taking a chance on First Time Writer. I want to begin by saying that I struggled with writing my story of grief, pain, loss, recovery, and acceptance. Struggled with whether I should or could even write a memoir, knowing that I had never attempted to write anything even close to what a memoir should be. I did not know if I wanted to put the story out to the world. Did I want to expose myself, to be so vulnerable? Why would I do that? Did I have anything worth saying? Why would my story make a difference? Could it possibly change anyone's life, or even mine? I had a little nudge from a few writer friends who felt that I should put a pen to paper, or maybe even put the story on the stage, the place that I am most comfortable. But I still wasn't sold. So as an exercise, in May of 2016, I sat down at my desk, I put my new wrist brace on, and I began to write. I wrote for hours, just spewing 3 years of my life since June of 2013 onto the screen in front of me. So now what do I do with it? I then began to read every memoir on the best-selling list. Memoirs on tragedy, on pain, on loss, on recovery, on family. I studied creative writing with a instructor named Almeda Glenn Miller just a few years earlier before the crash. And I decided to ask her if she was interested in mentoring me and acting as my editor. She said yes. Now I thought, I really do have to write this. So after 3 years of working with Almeda, with several beta readers and a writing group, I finally had a manuscript that needed shaping and structuring. That is when I asked Andy Grace, an old friend of mine from here in Nelson, to help me to finalize the manuscript before I dove into the world of sending it out to publishers, knowing that it would be a tough sell. But here I am today with a published book, with a story that I believe needs to be told. I have heard it said to me that I've turned lemons into lemonades, but that's far too trite. Our lives were worth so much more than that. But I will say, if something like being run over by a 4,000-pound van can still be the impetus to create art, then so be it. I will take this story and I will make art, because art has power. So let us begin at the beginning. The first thing I want to read is, I actually want to start right at the very top of the book. I want to start with the foreword. Now, the foreword to the book was actually written at the very end of the book. It was the very last thing I wrote before it went to publishing, to print. And I think it was written at that time because I felt, instead of jumping right in, I just needed to ease the reader in a little bit better, just a little bit slower. So I'm going to start today with the foreword and go right into the prologue. Thank you. Foreword. Everything you are about to read happened to me and to my daughter. We were victims of a crime. We survived the event. We lived through one of the worst experiences anyone can imagine. And we discovered no one is immune to tragedy. You never think something so bad as being in a head-on car crash can happen to you. These things always happen to someone else, but that is not reality. Anything can happen to anyone. We do not have control. We are dealt a hand face down. When we turn the cards over, it is a 50-50 chance in our favor. But what if no one became inebriated to the point of blacking out and got in their car and drove? That could happen. What if the system that we as a society created to support and defend victims always lifted up those who grieved? It is possible. But it rarely works out that way. There are hurdles to jump, denials to shock us, bureaucratic loopholes to maneuver. The rules are not designed to relieve stress and grief quick enough for those of us desperate to recover from trauma and get our lives back. But if we talk about it, if we tell our stories, we can make a difference. The book you are about to read is my truth. Some of it may be my opinion, but it happened to me. I experienced it all. I don't know what the offender in our case went through, how I felt, or how she felt, or why she did what she did that day. I can only tell you what I heard and saw in the courtroom the day we came face to face. I know what I know, and I have recorded it here so the reader can feel my pain and my joy. I was not sure I wanted to share the minute details of this story, but how could I not? You must go deep to make your point. Well, why would anyone care? So that is how I felt after I wrote the book, at the very end. And this is how I start the book. Prologue. A warm, sunny Sunday afternoon. My 19-year-old daughter and I drive from Calgary, Alberta to our home in Nelson, British Columbia. It is an 8-hour drive through the visually spectacular Rockies and Banff National Park, past Radium and Fairmont Hot Springs, through several small rural areas like Skookumchuck and Wausau. 4 hours into our trip home, a Ford Escape SUV hits us head on. The front end of my Toyota Corolla is gone. The engine is in our laps. At least that is what I am told. When I awake from the long coma, I have no voice or memory of why I am here. I try to speak, to ask why I am in a hospital room, but the verbal sound doesn't exist for me. Where did my voice go? Why can't I move? My head is fuzzy. I notice machines buzzing next to my numb body. Everything is so loud. Are those nurses or or maybe doctors running around the room. I see my husband's face in front of me. Larry is so close I can feel his breath and the warmth from his skin. He is saying something to me I can't understand. Then I remember I was in our car with Maia, driving home from Calgary. Maia, I think. Where is Maia? So Maia, come on over here for a second. Maia, can you share a little bit about when you first woke up? What was in your mind when you first came out? We were both in a coma.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, Maia, about when you first woke up in the hospital.
Mine was a pretty rude awakening. Mom, her body slipped into a coma on her own. They put me into a coma to help me heal from all the surgeries because my body wouldn't have been able to handle what they needed to put me through with surgeries. So they put me into the coma. One day finally tried to take me out of the coma, and they were able to accomplish it because my lungs were strong enough and I was able to breathe on my own. But when I woke up, I was waking up to them putting that big tube out of my throat. So they pulled the big tube, but it was one of those ones that branched off into my lungs. And so it really hurt. And even though they said it only took a few seconds, it felt like a long time coming out. And they had Dad in the room. And the reason why is because they wanted to have him to calm me down, because they said they tried to wake me up a week before, and my anxiety went through the roof. My heart rate went too high. So they had to keep me under again for a while until my lungs were able to handle themselves. So Dad was there to make me feel very secure. And I was honestly on a lot of medication, so it was really fuzzy then. But I remember asking Dad if you were still alive because I knew what had happened. And
you remembered.
Yeah, I remembered. And then I asked if I was skinny because I hadn't eaten food for 9 days.
Oh, what those 9
So I cared so much for Mom, but then I also clearly cared about my body.
Oh,
but yes, that was my first day.
When you're 19. Awesome. Thanks, Maia. Yeah. We're going to just go into a section now in the book that's called Hospital Life. I'm just going to share a little bit of what that life was for me when I first came out of the coma. Hospital life. I am staring straight ahead. I feel I have been staring in one spot for a long time. I can't move any part of my body except my lower arms. My right wrist has a bandage wrapped around it. What happened to that? There are large triangular sponge blocks on either side of my body, from the tops of my shoulders to my feet. I cannot shift myself at all. I hate sleeping on my back. My snoring always wakes me up. My throat is sore. There are things in my throat. What are they? Tubes? Why would I have tubes in my throat? It is so dark in this room. I can't make anything out. Why am I trapped in this cold, gray place? Oh my God, where are my teeth? They are gone. Someone pulled them or punched them out. What the hell? I spent thousands of dollars on those teeth. I can't feel them with my tongue. Something is in the way. That tube. I have to move that tube. Find out what happened to my teeth. If I can reach it with my left hand, the one that doesn't have a bandage, maybe I can pull it out. It's hard to breathe. I feel exhausted just trying to lift my hand. I can feel something tube-like. That has to be it. Pull it out, Pat, I tell myself. There is a woman in a blue uniform running at me. She is yelling in accented English. Is she Russian? Her accent sounds like it. She is telling me to stop pulling at the respirator. Respirator? What have they done to me? Who are these people? She has straps and little mittens in her hands. She puts the mitts on my hands and then ties me to the bed with the straps. I want to push her away, but I can't. My arms are useless and my body won't move. I tell my body to move, but it won't. The Russian spy calls for her comrade, and they continue to work on me. Then they look at something on the wall behind me. The woman grabs a small flip chart from the table beside me. She takes her pen from her breast pocket and writes something. Who is their boss? Why are they holding me hostage? Where is Larry? Why isn't he saving me? Everything goes dark again. So that was very early on when I woke up from my coma. And of course, I was as high as a kite on super, super drugs. And I had no idea that I had all these tubes in my throat, that I had, broken limbs. And I had no idea any of this had happened. I could not figure it out at all. And of course, the poor lady who was tying my hands down, etc., was the ICU nurse. And when I did realize what was going on, I felt terrible. And so I asked Larry to get them something to apologize for me. And Larry then put the word out, and these wonderful people from Nelson who make chocolates, chocolate fellas here in Nelson, they sent all these chocolates to the hospital in Calgary at Foothills. And we gave them to the staff. I didn't. Larry gave them to the staff. So thank you, chocolate fellas. And that was my story of coming out. And that was my first story, I think, one of the first hallucinations that I had. And I know that Maia has a little hallucination story. Maia's going to share one little story with you before we move into the next piece.
Well, I had quite a few, but there's one that was quite significant that definitely I still think about, and I think it was pretty hilarious as well. So I went for a CT scan of my femurs because they had just put the femur rods in. And when they took me to the CT, I guess I never opened my eyes, but I thought my eyes were wide open and I was seeing, it felt like what I was seeing, it was real. And what was real to me was that they took me outside, out into a pasture, into a barn. They then put me into a barn with chickens and cows. And then when they put me into the CT that was going back and forth, which didn't even take long, I imagined myself going down a slide of hay. And when they brought me back, I bawled my eyes out to Dad and cried and screamed and said, I can't believe you let them do that to me. Never let them take me again. And Dad just said, Maia, you went for a CT scan. And I talked to the nurse after on, and I guess I never even opened my eyes, so I totally visualized it. I was conscious, I was talking to them, but I never even opened my eyes, so it was all up here.
All up there.
Yeah, hell of a drug.
Listen, lots of drugs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Maia. Thanks so much for sharing that. I want to get into a little piece here. It's about family. When the weekend that the crash happened, Maia and I were in Calgary, and we were visiting my sister Jeannie and her family. Jeannie still lives in Cape Breton, but she has a daughter that lives in Calgary. So we were all camped out at Tiffany's house. Hello, Tiffany, if you're out there. And so it ended up that Jeannie and her family were the first ones to get to the hospital, to Foothills Hospital, and wait for Maia and I to be helicoptered to the Foothills Hospital. And so Jeannie ended up staying for 2 weeks until I was out of the dark, and she felt good about leaving us. And while Jeannie was there with me, she sat by my bed for most of that time. And it wasn't till about a year and a half later that this next story happened. This is called Jeannie's Letter. Around a year and a half after the crash, my sister Jeannie asked me if I wanted the notes that I had written as my only way to communicate after I awoke from the coma. I told her, yes, please send them to me in the mail. She had kept them all and taken them home to Cape Breton with her. Some of them are in my handwriting, disorderly with half-formed letters. Others are in Jeannie's hand. I had begun my communication rehabilitation with a letter board. I would point at a letter that I needed to spell a word for the message that I wanted to convey, and Jeannie would write it down. A few weeks after, Jeannie told me that she had these notes. A large brown envelope arrived in the mail with a long letter from Jeannie. wrapped in lots of plain white notepaper, scribbled on in pencil. My hands shook as I ripped the envelope open. I wanted to know more about my state of mind during those first weeks in ICU. I would never have guessed that the pencil marks I saw on the paper were my scribbles. I can barely understand the writing or the printing. It is just a messy mix of both. I turned to the letter. October 2nd, 2014. Hi, Trish. This is my recollection of up to the accident and after. We had a great weekend visiting with Tiff, Bren, Vanessa, Lincoln, Harry, you, and Maya. We made meals, walked, shopped, even picked out Tiffany's wedding dress. It was absolutely a perfect weekend. The day you were leaving, we went out shopping for a footstool for you, and then we went back to Tiff's for lunch before you and Maya left for home, around 1 p.m. Anyway, you left to pick up Maya at her boyfriend's, and you headed for home in Nelson. You were going to call us when you made it. We had just sat down for supper around 6 p.m. when Larry called. He said you were in a really bad head-on collision and asked if we would keep in touch with the hospital in Cranbrook. I called that hospital, and they told me that you were on your way by air to the Foothills Hospital in Calgary. Larry then asked if we would go and meet you and Maya at the hospital here. And so began the 2-week journey. At 10 p.m., your air ambulance arrived at Foothills. I watched the helicopter come in, and I watched as the attendants took you into the emergency. They handed me your rings and purse and took us to a family room to wait for word of how you were. Maya arrived about 2 hours after you, and they took her right into surgery. Around midnight, the head nurse from OR came and told us that they had done all they could do. I still remember her words. Are you her sister? I'm sorry, but we don't think she's going to make it. Would you like to see her? We will be back shortly to take you to see her. Again, we are so sorry. They wanted to clean you up before we could see you. We were in shock. Around 2 a.m., a young doctor came to see us and told us they found the problem. Your aorta and a large artery in your leg were severed. He said they revived you 3 times and they were not out of the woods. It was moment to moment, but we were hopeful. Maya was in critical condition, and we knew she was not as critical as you. We did not get to see her until Larry and your other kids arrived. When they did arrive, it was very emotional, especially for Liam and Zoe. They did not expect to see either of you in this state. Larry was a rock. I'm sending you all the papers that you wrote on, and I want you to know that from the moment you started to write, we knew you were going to pull through, with some setbacks. I almost didn't want to leave you when my 2 weeks were up and I had to go home, torn between you and Maya and home. The day you wrote about your OR experience, hovering above the gurney, I asked you about it. I said, who was there? You tried to answer with your eyes and a shrug. I'm guessing in time you may remember more. The night this happened is as vivid as anything, and for a while I dreamt of it. It seemed the better you got, the less I dreamt about it. Anyways, Trish, you have the strongest constitution of anyone I know. God bless you, girl. Hope you can decipher your writing. Love, Jeannie. So that's the letter that I received from Jeannie a year and a half after. Just trying to tell me and let me know what it was like in those first couple of weeks, because it was really hard to decipher and even remember what they were like. Like I didn't even remember the word board, the letter board until Jeannie shared it with me. I totally forgot about it. The little experience she talks about, the OR experience, well, that was, I don't know what that was. I mean, I actually saw myself on the gurney pushed in to the OR room, and not quite sure what that meant or what it was, but I certainly remember that. The next thing that I want to do is I want to do a little intro, just a little intro into a song. And I'm going to have Sydney come on real soon, just after I finish this little intro. Just for some of you that don't know, after the book was written, I have a friend, her name's Kelly Rebar, she's a playwright, and she said, you know, I think this could really work on stage. This could be a stage production of some sort, maybe just a production, like a presentation with some music. I could really hear music in it because of your background and your life as a singer and your family who are also musical. And so I said, oh, okay, maybe that would work. I wasn't sure, but what I did was I went and applied for a Canada Council grant to actually adapt the book into a stage presentation with music. And then I got the grant. So we've done it. So between Kelly Rebar, myself, and my friend Conrad Pluta, who's a composer and musical director in theater, the three of us have, over the last year, we have put together a 45-minute piece with music based on the book. And it's been just incredible. What an experience to do online, through Zoom, you name it, during COVID. It was quite an incredible trip. So I just want to read a little intro into Sydney's song. After the crash, Maia and I heard from many members of the Selkirk College family. The most touching correspondence from Selkirk staff, students, and community members happened sometime in July when a box arrived at the hospital in Calgary for us. Maia and I opened it together. Inside the box were hundreds of colorful little handcrafted birds. They were miniature paper cranes. A note was in the box. It said this gift had been made by students, staff, faculty, and friends one afternoon as they all gathered in the college lounge area to make us 1,000 cranes as a symbol of hope and healing. In Japanese culture, 1,000 cranes are a symbol of a legendary promise from the gods that anyone who folds 1,000 origami cranes will be granted a wish, such as recovery from illness or injury. As Maia and I began lifting out the cranes, we discovered they were connected by a string, and there were random notes of love and inspiration written by hand on most of the multicolored, beautiful shaped birds. Now I'd like to introduce Sydney Black singing 1,000 Cranes.
Two steps forward, hold on tight. One step back, continue the fight. Living life, seconds at a time. What to call a victory? Steps so small I cannot see. No direction seems to be moving forward or moving sideways, just moving nowhere at all. Count your blessings one by one. 2 loving daughters, a husband, a son. We're all living life, seconds at a time. Time that we cannot get back. Time stuck in this cul-de-sac. Setback after setback. Larry and Liam and Maya and Zoe and family. Community for me. 1,000 cranes will help me stand my ground. Yes, and 1,000 cranes with their wings all abound. All of these people, all of this love, and 1,000 cranes flying above.
Yay! Thank you, Sydney. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Conrad. Yes. Thank you, Conrad Pluta, for writing that beautiful song. So the show, the presentation, is supposed to be on tour this spring. Who knows what's going to happen? But I'm hoping that at least we can do a live stream of it out in April. So keep your eye out for that. Thank you so much. I'm going to do one more reading at least. we'll see. And don't forget to put your questions in if you have questions about anything we've read today. I'm going to read a little bit about the sentencing part. Of course, as you would know, after being in a car crash like this, there's always the legal parts that have to go along with this. So I am going to read a little bit about the sentencing and the criminal portion of this experience. Shara. This is the name of the young woman who drove into us at highway speed on that fateful day. I will call her only by her first name. She is the only person I know with that name. Soon we would meet her in a courtroom, or at least be in the same room and know that we were in the same room, conscious this time. We would hear her story, and she would hear ours. We arrived and were rushed into a waiting room for victims. We were in time, and the judge would be ready momentarily. We met the Crown prosecutor for our case for the first time, just before we entered the courtroom. I had spoken to him on the phone once. He had called me to confirm that I knew the case had finally been put on his desk. I thought he was a young man by the sound of his voice, and I was right. He looked around 40, well-dressed, carried a briefcase with our case files, and within minutes a court attendant came to get us and guide us to the front bench, which reminded me of a church pew and just as uncomfortable. I remember wishing I had brought a pillow with me. The small courtroom in Cranbrook, British Columbia was stuffy and overflowing with bodies. The room smelled of damp boots and coats mixed with cigarette smoke. My senses were still very sensitive after so many months of being in a sterile environment and then being in my own house, which was kept incredibly clean. The smells in the cramped space were overwhelming, and my stomach churned with nausea. Loud voices, some laughing, some in conversation, filled every corner of the tiny room. The multiple fluorescent lights that lined the ceiling in long rows like miniature train boxcars were bright and made for an illusionary contrast to the dark day that was just outside the building. Shara walked into the courtroom and took a seat next to her court-appointed defense lawyer. She had dressed businesslike in a black pantsuit, her hair a sandy blonde. She looked about 5'10", her features, height, strong, athletic body type, reminding me of a female character in Avatar. She turned to face the standing room only court chamber and smiled at several people to my left. The East Kootenay region is her home territory. I froze. I could not breathe. That moment was the first time I had seen her. She didn't look at me. Her hair fell below her broad shoulders. Her features were sharp on a wide and what seemed to be worn and tired face. Shara, a young woman in her mid-30s with a 4-year-old son, was in court defending herself against 2 counts of drunk driving, causing bodily harm, and 2 counts of driving with a suspended license. She had lost her license 11 months earlier before she drove into us, into a similar fashion, and in the same state of mind. So that was just a little experience of being in the courtroom in Cranbrook. That was the first day. There was 2 days in that courtroom. If I could just finish off today's reading, one last little bit towards the end. It is about forgiveness. And I do see that there's some questions there. We're going to get to those in 1 minute. Questions regarding forgiveness and fault and my response to them are continually being asked of me. My thoughts on forgiveness are clear. Fault is a term that I needed to dissect. Who is responsible for this event in my life and that of my daughters and my family? I do have that answer. I know for a fact not everyone will agree with me. This entire incident, in my view, is the fault of the driver. Do I sound harsh? It is a fact. She has a disease called alcoholism. But her disease had to be monitored and restrained, and will need to be forever. It cannot be let out of its cage. By the time her disease affected Maia and me, it was well documented that she was ill, yet she had not been put into treatment that would control or heal her ailments. The sickness is prevalent in our society. I am very aware of alcohol and its demons. For those who are not strong enough to recognize it, control it, and treat themselves, and many can't for a host of reasons, too many others will fall prey to their disorder. Too many times the act of drunk driving ends in fatalities or victims who survive and are damaged the rest of their lives. I will never know why we survived, but damaged or not, I will remain grateful every day we beat the odds. Acceptance is to embrace without resistance. Then I guess I do not accept the situation in which I have been placed. I do not embrace the life our family has had to endure and continue to struggle with daily. You would think that as time goes by, I would soon get used to my scars and inability to fulfill past desires, like eating cashews or corn on the cob, or maybe belting out a musical theater song. Maia's dreams of playing soccer or snowboarding or even walking on the beach without pain is only a memory to her now. No, I do not embrace without resistance. I move forward, I adjust, I breathe through it all. But the road to acceptance is long, and it is not so easy to always see the end. And I would like to end my reading there today. There's so many things, of course, that I didn't get to touch on, but then you have to read the book to find out. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything.
That's an absolutely great place to move on to your audience questions. So while we're doing this portion, if people have more questions, feel free to pop them in, or even just something you want to hear more about, if it's not a direct question. One question that probably a lot of friends and family have is, can you sign my copy later? And I think that goes without saying that you'd be happy to, I'm sure.
Oh, so happy to. Do I mail it to
them? Steve and Gerald ask about your healing journey and like what was writing your story a healing process for you, and what's next on your healing journey?
Right. I thought when I first started to write it, May 2016, I thought, well, sure, maybe it'll just be therapy. Maybe it'll just be a good way for me to get it out, somehow. And it was that at the beginning. It really was that. I wasn't looking at it as a writer at all at the beginning. I just put everything. I'm telling you, I couldn't leave the basement. I remember Larry yelling down, "Pat, get up here and eat dinner." "No, I'll be up in a bit." And I just kept writing and writing until I felt I had all this stuff on paper. There was no rhyme or reason. The structure was everywhere. It didn't make any sense. It took 3 years with Almeida to actually figure out how to get it together. And by that point, I had made a decision. Oh, this is going to be a book. And I wasn't crying anymore. Share a little story. I wasn't able to sing or talk for a very long time. And so when I first could hear music, meaning it didn't blow my ears out, the song, it was a Steve Perry song. It was Journey, Don't Stop Believing. That is the first song I was able to listen to 7 or 8 months after the crash. And so as I was writing, I would put that song on. And you know what? I don't know why. It inspired me, but then I would cry. And then I would put it on again. And then, it was just that it pushed me forward, and it also drove tears out of me. The other thing about healing is the whole aspect of it, seeing a therapist. That was a huge break for me. And I think Maia could probably say something about seeing a counselor. I mean, I'm still seeing one.
I still see one as well. It's been a life changer for sure, especially when you have a break from it and you realize how much you value that individual in your life, and those strategies and just the sessions. When you don't have that for a time, sometimes it's even a short time, and you notice a change in your life, it does make a huge difference to have that consistently. Yeah.
So that was a huge part of our healing journey, was to make sure that you continue to go to a therapist. I mean, Larry went to a therapist, we all had to. I mean, PTSD is just something you have to deal with after you're involved in something that through no fault of your own. I mean, it's a violent crime. So
yeah.
And
it's so wonderful to have you and your family speaking to that importance, because so often mental health has stigma around it about, people don't want to talk about it and don't want to say, I see a therapist. But so hearing you say how much a therapist helps is really refreshing.
Yeah, 100%. I just want to add that little thing. The other thing that was really big on our healing journey was, and someone might have asked this question, that, we were approached by MAD Canada, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and they became a big part of our lives. And because you can focus on something bigger than yourself, it allows you to start to heal. It allows you to see more than just your own pain, and you become part of a larger group pain, if I could say that. It's not just about you anymore. It's really important. And so they've been a big part of our lives.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, like you're no longer in a silo with your pain. You see that others are experiencing similar,
Absolutely.
if different experiences.
We hate to see that they are, but they are.
There is some security and comfort in knowing that you're not alone. And as much as we wish that there weren't so many people who are dealing with something similar, it is comforting to know that there's a community out there that just gets it.
Yeah,
that gets it.
Mm-hmm. So Shannon asked, how do you think the justice system should change in order to lessen the trauma for victims of this kind of crime?
Yeah, and I didn't get.
And I know you didn't go into too much of the depth, so if you wanted to go into that now,
yeah,
I'm sure that context would help.
I didn't read it because it's so complex. I would have had to read a whole chapter, So I just made a choice not to get into that chapter. I mean, there's the two. There's the criminal case, and then there's the civil case. And suddenly you're just out of the hospital, and you've got lawyers calling you and meeting with you and wanting to deal with all this stuff, And my brain at the beginning was really dealing with the offender. I really wanted to make sure that there was a case, and that there was going to be court, and that she was going to, be accountable for her actions. What's come out of all of this, from the civil suit and the criminal suit, is how victims are re-victimized constantly, over and over and over again, by the whole system. It was just like we would just be getting over one hurdle, and then another one would pop up. If it wasn't our medical issues, right, then suddenly it would be something to do with our offender who got out a year and a half earlier than she was supposed to, and then they let her out on the day of the 3rd year anniversary of the crash, which just blew my mind that they didn't have it in front of them. So did you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a lot I could say just from our personal experience and my personal experience. But the big one for me, or there's many big ones, but one that pops into my mind right away is the fact that when this happened to me, I was 19. And so when we were going through all of the court case and just going through all the discoveries and going against the defendants, I was maybe like 21 or 22 probably. And the thing is, for me,
we're talking about the civil suit now?
I'm not too sure which one it was,
okay.
But the moral of the story is, when somebody is that age, I think that needs to come into account for your lawyers, or just for other lawyers, the defendants, on respect. And not only because there's a victim, and I understand how that system goes, that people don't want to lose money, but also there's respect for an individual and a respect for somebody's age. And I was very young, I was very vulnerable, and I was very hurt. And I was also trying to be a human being and going to university, and they didn't care for that. And it was very clear in the way they spoke to me, the way they treated me. I was suddenly forced into becoming an adult that I was not ready for. And I was also treated like an adult, but in a negative way, very negative way. So I think there's something to say about how they treat their victims, but also the young victims.
Right.
Yeah.
So you are talking about the civil suit then, Maia. And of course she wasn't allowed to have her dad with her because you were 19 and then 20. And so
Technically an adult.
Yeah, technically an adult. So she wasn't allowed to have her dad, and she wasn't allowed to have me in the room either. So
I was able to speak for myself, no problem. But at the same time, it is very hard when you are dealing with internal stuff, physical, emotional, and mental, and then suddenly more people are bringing on a plethora of more pain.
Right.
It's really difficult and telling you like a story for what happened, but you don't deserve anything from us.
Yeah.
And then trying to make us seem like we're lying, or
asking Maia if she had a drink at lunch.
Yeah,
before,
and trying in any way to make it
before the crash
be my fault because I was the driver. And so that was really hard for me to take on while I was taking on a lot of other stuff. So I think they need to consider empathy. And I know that world doesn't really think of empathy much, but I think that is something that they need to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you get to help with that work while working with MAD? Is that the kind of thing you?
Well, we talk about it. And Matt is definitely an advocate for the victims. So we definitely talk about it there. But I am also a member of the Victims Advisory Committee for the Pacific Regional, like the coast of BC. We meet there a couple times. Well, we used to, a couple times a year. And we meet with the Parole Board and the Corrections Canada. We sit around the table and we talk about these things, what the Victims' Bill of Rights, and we tell our stories to them. And I told them things like, you have to have more empathy for the victims, like my story of phoning me the day she's going to get out, and it was the anniversary of the crash. Just those little things. And I think just by writing this book and making sure that it gets in the hands of lawyers and the medical world, I think that, and victims, to try to advocate for victims, that's what we want to do. And I think at the end of the day, that was the big reason why I just went for the book and just said, I think we have a story to tell. I have a story to tell, and I think it can help people. And anyone who's read the book or is going to, you'll see I don't really tell much of Maia's story. Maia's in there as much as I know. I don't try to tell her story. And Maia will tell her story the way she needs to in her lifetime.
Two separate stories.
Yeah.
But which is kind of interesting,
Yeah.
Which actually brings, Rita asked, we mentioned Maia's blog, which I assume is part of your story as well. How can we find it?
Yeah, so I was doing a website. That website still exists, but I kind of turned all of my information, my stories onto Instagram, just because Instagram is just such a big part of the world right now. So I have an Instagram handle, Living Now with Maia, and that's where I do all of my blogging. I post a lot of photos, whether that's photos of myself or my injuries of the past. And I am currently making a podcast. So that podcast, I'm hopeful in the next few weeks, the first one will come out. That'll be called Living Now. And that goes over, it's like my version of writing a book, but in a podcast form. I love to storytell, and it's going to be a lot of the stories of what we've experienced. Once again, just like what Mom said, I try not to tell Mom's stories because those are her stories, and I don't know her stories the way she knows them, but we have had conversations, and I also will interview Mom in one of them. So that'll be awesome. And so, yeah, on Living Now with Maia, you're able to check out my Instagram and read everything, and also contact me through there.
Great. Thank you. Going back to the crash and the court cases, Gerald asked if either had a chance to speak to the lady responsible, would you? I'm not sure if you did get an opportunity, and what would you want to say?
Right. For those that have read the book, you will know this already. So it's a little bit of a spoiler to say that, she did approach me at court. It was just too crazy and too weird, and it was like something from another world to stand on the courtroom steps and be approached by her. And she gave me a letter. What was not really a conversation that day. But when she went to prison for 2.5 years, and she did do a year in prison and 6 months in a halfway house, I was approached by restorative justice that worked with the women's prison in Fraser Valley, and they asked me if I wanted to connect with her. So it was me being asked if I wanted to, because I'm the victim. And so I could have actually phoned her or done a video chat, or I could have gone down during parole during one of her hearings. I just wasn't well enough. Like, I was just not moving. I was going to doctor's appointments, and so I ended up writing her I think it was 6 questions, and I sent them through the restorative justice folks. And I waited for her to answer me, and her answers were just short, nothing personal. It was just like, oh my gosh, well, I didn't get anything from her in that note that said, maybe we could talk, or maybe, we'd like that would be a good thing to do, to try to have a restorative justice session. Mm-hmm. And I just was left kind of empty. And I decided that I wasn't going to try again. My thing is, I don't even know anything about her. Like, it's so weird to be connected to somebody that you don't know in that way, that has made such a huge change in our lives. And she's a stranger, don't know who she is. I just know things about her. I don't know her, and I probably never will. I can't imagine. I mean, I know she lives. Yeah, I know, it's okay. It's okay. She lives in the Kootenays, so you could bump into her. I mean, I would know her. I would know her if I saw her.
It won't happen.
No, but every once in a while you get a little bit of anxiety if you see somebody that kind of, that looks like her. But I think that's just normal and natural. But restorative justice, I believe in it 100%. It didn't work for us. I'm sorry. I know it does work. And maybe if I had pushed it in some other way, it might have happened. Do you have anything to say about that, Maia?
Oh, I just didn't have a desire to communicate with her, not out of anger or anything. No. It was that I didn't want to get angry. I wanted to focus on my healing and on my education. I was still in university. I was still learning how to walk. I was going through surgeries. I was having like 2 surgeries a year. And the last thing that was on my mind was, I'm going to spend time and put my emotional capability towards this woman. No, it was one less thing that I needed to worry about. And I am grateful that Mom put a lot of effort into making sure that she actually did get a court date, and that she actually did go to prison. Was it enough? I don't know. I don't know.
We don't know.
But all I know is that what I needed in that moment, I did. And I'm grateful that I did that, because I might have not had that same year or those same 2 years as I did for my personal healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Danielle says, it must be so hard to forgive. And I know that, Pat, writing your book, you do have a strong message of hope for other survivors, and that and I understand that was important for you to include in your book. So I don't know if either of you wanted to talk a little bit about the forgiveness. I know that you kind of did bring it up a little in your reading.
Yeah. Forgiveness is a really tough word. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't not forgive her. I don't really know.
You forgive her?
Well, no, it's just crazy. I can't just say, yes, I forgive her. I cannot say that. No, and do you feel? What do you feel?
No, I don't forgive her. But there's, like I said, there's not that hate or anything.
Yeah.
There's no hate.
I don't hate her.
There's no detest. It's just that I don't want to put energy into it. I have enough stuff to put energy towards, and that's going to take a lot of energy to forgive her, because that is, like you said, it's a loaded word. It's a big word. It actually it takes a lot of you and of your energy to finally do that. And right now it's a no. I can't say what it would be like in a few years, maybe in a few years, but right now that's not where my energy's going.
Yeah. I have to agree. We really had to work on ourselves. We had to put ourselves first. And I have no anger. I have no anger. I don't hate her. I grieve. You know, I grieve for me. I grieve for Maia. I grieve for my family. You know, that's enough. That's enough. That's all. I hope that answers your question. Okay, yeah.
Well, we're getting close to time, so I'll just do one last question. It's from Kathy. I'll kind of paraphrase it. She's asking how often you both still require medical attention, and maybe you could more talk to what does your day-to-day look like? What's the new life that you're carving out for yourselves now?
Right. Thank God I do not have to go to the doctor as much as I used to. I didn't eat for 18 months. I was on something called TPN because there was so much internal abdominal injury. And so I was hooked up. I had what's called a dome in my chest, and I was hooked up for 14 hours a day to liquid food. So that was 18 months. And then slowly after that, I started to eat. Everything had to heal inside me. My stomach, I had lost a third of my stomach. It had to be sewn back together, and it didn't heal properly. So it had to be redone. And then it had to be completely left alone for months and months and months. Do not put a thing. I wasn't even allowed water, nothing. And that was when that was over. And I went through lots of stuff through that time, but that was probably the biggest thing that really had to heal during that time. I mean, I broke a shoulder, which I still have, and broken ankle and that, but those things heal. And now things slowly are coming back, and I'm feeling pretty good. I still, once in a while I have to watch what I eat. There's things I can't eat anymore, as I kind of said in there. No more cashews, no more corn on the cob. But the doctor now for me is, he kind of knows me pretty darn well now. And when I call him, he's a great listener. And I'm on a really good path. I'm good. I'm on a good path. Maia?
Yeah, I wish I could say I don't go as much, but I do.
Maia goes more than
we have a different, because our injuries were so different. Mom got the internal from the seatbelt and from the way she was impacted. I got most of the bone injuries due to the engine coming on me. And so with that being said, I still deal with a significant amount of bone deformities and pain. And so I have chronic pain. And so my day-to-day would be that I do struggle with regular daily hobbies, like getting myself dressed, taking a shower. Like I have to have a shower chair, sit in the shower. If I stand for too long, I get really swollen and it hurts. I take meds every day, unfortunately, but for right now, they're getting me by, and I have no regrets for the things that I'm taking right now because they're pushing me through and letting me live the life that I'm living right now. I've had a surgery every single year. Last year I had a ankle fusion that ended up taking about like 6 months to recover from. And I'm still kind of recovering from it because I just got diagnosed with CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome. Often it does get triggered from a traumatic surgery, which is what happened. The surgery was very traumatic a year ago. And so I'm currently going back and forth from here to Vancouver to go to the interventional pain clinic in Vancouver. I leave on Wednesday to do a series of injections. So that's next for me to see if these injections will help my nerve system and all my nerve pain. I'm hopeful about it. I've been getting the best treatment I've ever had since moving to Nelson, which is shocking because I didn't think a small town would have the best care, but it really has because it's been so personalized. They really take care. And then they got me hooked up with Vancouver, which never happened even when I lived in Vancouver. So it's been great in the last little bit. Pain's bad, but the care has been great.
Super.
I'm glad to hear it. And yeah, our healthcare system, many thanks and love to them for the care they gave you both, and your family as a whole.
Absolutely.
And all they're doing right now.
Yeah, I know.
Absolutely.
I know.
Yeah.
I know there are more questions that we didn't have time to get to, but what I'll say is
Yeah.
a lot of those questions will probably be answered by reading the book. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Yes.
And so if you want a signed copy, Otter Books and Bookmark are the two official booksellers that have a signed book plate at Bookmark and signed copies at Otter Books. Or it sounds like you might be able to contact Pat personally, and she might be able to hook you up. I'm sure your friends and family have already taken advantage.
Awesome.
And I want to thank our audience for joining us here. The chat has been wonderful. I'll make sure that Pat gets a copy of all the lovely messages you're sending. Thank you to you both, Maia and Pat, and thank you, Sydney, as well, who joined us. That was a really powerful song that she shared. In the chat, I did include the link to your website, pathenman.com, where people can find the events that you're doing. And if they have more questions for Caitlin Press, feel free to contact us. And Pat, I'm going to guess somewhere on pathenman.com is a way for them to contact you.
Yes, I can. Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody out there. And I know you're from all over Canada. I saw my Aunt Olive from Dartmouth. Saw people in from Toronto. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you,
all
everyone.
my friends here in Nelson.
All right. I will end the broadcast now. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.